Hi everybody, this is Brian again, and let's begin our journey through the book of John. One of the things that I told you last time was that the book of John is a great place to get to know Jesus, and that's definitely true. It's a very straightforward book, easy to understand, except for the first part of the first chapter. The first 18 verses of the book of John are a little bit confusing. From that point on, the rest of the book is what we call a narrative. It's just written as a story. It's just a very simple history of Jesus went here and did this and said that. So we'll get there, and that'll be great. But first, we have to make our way through this prologue, this introduction. And there, it's a little more confusing. John makes some statements that need a little explaining. And we're just going to start with one of those in this video. I want to talk about the first few verses where Jesus gets this really interesting title. John says in John chapter 1, verse 1, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it." Now, as you read a little later in the chapter and in the book, it becomes clear that John is talking about Jesus there. But he doesn't use his name to start with, and he uses this really interesting title. He calls Jesus the Word. What does that mean? Well, if you think about what words do, words communicate, words express. And so Jesus is given the title, the Word, because he is God's self-expression. He is God's way of communicating himself to us. The Bible says, we'll see it later in John chapter 4, that God is spirit. So God has no physical form. But when God wanted to show himself to us, he took on a physical form. He came as a man, and that was his son. That was Jesus. Let me read to you a few verses down. In verse 14, it says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." And then down in verse 18, it says, "No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known." So Jesus has made God known. He has come and dwelt among us, and we've seen the glory of God through Jesus. Later on in this book, in chapter 14, we're going to see one of Jesus' disciples say to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Just show us God, Jesus. Just satisfy our curiosity." And Jesus says to him, he says, "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I've been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father," which is a really bold claim. Jesus says, if you see me, you're seeing God. If you've been around me, you've encountered God. And it's okay if you don't know if you believe that right now. That's all right. Again, remember what John said about this book, that he is trying to prove to us. So he has the whole book to get us to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is who he says he is. For right now, you can think of these statements in this prologue as claims that the Bible is making, and we're going to see as we go through if we think that they're true. But this is the first claim in this prologue, that Jesus is God's self-expression to us. And when we look at Jesus, we're seeing God. And as we get to know Jesus in this book, we're getting to know what God is like. So God's not a mystery. We don't have to guess about what God is like. Jesus has shown him to us. Hope that makes sense. And we'll tackle some other aspects of this confusing little prologue in the next video.